Hi, hello and welcome to our September WMISA seminar. So before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous owners of the land that I'm on today. And so today I'm at Monash University in Victoria, and our universities are on the land of the people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Indigenous Australians are the oldest continuous culture, and they were the first Australian earth and environmental scientists. So we've got a lot to learn from them and their deep knowledge of the Australian land and environment. So the WMISA seminar series is about showcasing the amazing work of women in earth and environmental science in Australasia. As well as the live seminars, we also have collated recordings from seminars that have been hosted by other organisations, and we put them all up on our website and on our YouTube channel, so they're there for you to watch if you're interested in checking them out. So from next month, the live series of seminars will be on the second Wednesday of every month. So the next one will be on October 13. You can sign up as a member of WMISA to get a notification of the upcoming seminars, or you can follow us on Twitter. Today's seminar is going to be presented by Anita Parbhakar-Fox. Anita is a British Asian geoscientist and is the leader of the new mine waste transformation through characterisation group at the W.H. Bryan Mining and Geology Research Centre within the Sustainable Minerals Institute. Anita's research is focused on mine waste characterisation to improve mine planning and waste management practices, where she's worked with the mining industry, the met sector and government stakeholders. She's developed new tests and protocols for improving waste characterisation, and it's also involved in identifying remediation options for abandoned or historic mine sites. Anita has led major industry and government-funded projects characterising a range of mine waste materials to evaluate their circular economy potential. Well, that sounds so exciting. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Anita.
Thank you, Melanie, and I hope that everyone can hear me okay and see my screen. So I just want to follow on from Melanie's acknowledgement of country. So the University of Queensland also acknowledges the traditional owners and the custodianship of the lands on which we meet today. So my talk today is called Minority Report, the story of an environmental geologist. I guess when I was putting this together, I was thinking about, some of the issues and the challenges and the opportunities that I've had in my career. And so I guess I kind of wanted to frame it in this context. So that's kind of kicking off. Now, the thing that this talk is going to do that's a bit different for me is I want to hear from you, and I want to try and hear from you real time. So if you've got your mobile phone to hand, what I'm going to do throughout this talk is to pose a series of questions to you as the audience using Mentimeter. So you may have used Mentimeter before. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is to, get on your smartphone, type in Mentimeter to your browser, and then I want you to type in this code 14637139, and it's going to take you to a question. And hopefully, and Melanie, if this doesn't work, then just come online and shout at me. It's going to take you to a question, and this is the question it's posing. Do you identify as a minority? See, I want to understand who's on the line today. So now you could be Asian, you could be Indigenous, you could be transgender, whatever you consider to be a minority. If you do identify as one, then please pick one down. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. If you're not sure, that's also fine. But I think it's just a nice way for us all to reflect on whether or not we are a minority and how we actually perceive ourselves. So we can see we've got 8 yeses and 7 nos and 0 not sures, which is good. So I'm going to leave that poll going on in the background. So it is still ticking there, but I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is going back to my slide deck. So that's good to hear a bit from you guys. Here we are, back to the slide deck. And so if you do identify as a minority, I want you to articulate what type of minority or minority group you belong to. So there's another code here. So I think on the poll, you can switch, go to another poll and then add that one in, please, for 6489554. And if I flick to that one, it should be here. So Melanie, again, shout out if it's not right.
Yeah, that's
So
worked great.
Yep. If yes, what type? So somebody's minority ethnic, someone is a woman, and certainly in earth sciences it feels like we are at times the minority. Ethnicity, disability, chronic illness, these are all definitely minorities. So it's good that you've put that in. So I just think this is a nice way just to capture a bit of a snapshot in terms of who's on the line, and also broaden our thoughts around minorities and how we can actually improve earth sciences when we think about the different types of minorities that we have. Because I guess sometimes we do focus on maybe some of the more obvious ones, like myself being a woman of colour too. So yeah, thank you for that. Anyway, those polls are sort of live in the background, and we'll come to them from time to time. So going back to my slide deck, this is me. My name's Anita. As you know, I have met some of you on the line, which is great to see some familiar names, and some of you I've yet to meet, and I look forward to the time when we do. But fundamentally, I'm an environmental scientist. I trained at I did my first degree at the Royal School of Mines in London, where I graduated in environmental geology. And then I consequently did my PhD down at the University of Tasmania in environmental geochemistry. And, I've undertaken a number of postdocs focused in the space of ARD, acid rock drainage prediction. And I'm at Mount Morgan here, and that's a nice big pool of acid and metalliferous drainage, which I nearly fell into as I tried to sample these mine tailings here, which was perhaps not my finest hour, but never mind, all good. But that's how I see myself. But I realised sort of in many situations, other people see me quite differently. They see me as a woman. They see me as a brown person. They see me as an early career to mid-career researcher, because I look quite young, so people don't quite know where, what sort of age bracket I fall into. And other people, they see me as a mother. So I guess to me, I perceive myself as an environmental geochemist. But when I talk to other people, there's a whole kind of range of things that's going through their mind. Certainly in an academic context, there's people who see me as, potentially someone who could be on a committee or a panel or a grant because I look great for the stats. In other situations, people might discount me from doing something because, I might need to go and pick up my kids. And so I guess sometimes, other people see that minority in you before you actually sort of present it to them. So it's a weird one. So I guess what I wanted to do was I wanted to go through each of these different sort of minorities experiences that I have in these different facets, and just sort of drill down on them a little bit more and share with you some of my experiences. So I'm going to start off with being a woman. So I want you to go back to your phone again, and I've got another code for you to enter, which is probably the same as the last one. So I think what I need to do is exit that and go to the next one, which if I present that there, it should work. And the question is, have you ever been a victim of sexism at work? And it's kind of sad seeing the numbers here. They are very rapidly going up in the yes column. There's no no's and there's no unsure's, which I think is actually quite sad. Okay. There's one no, which is good. Two. Okay, and that poll is still sort of live and back. We can, if there's time at the end, we can revisit them and see what the final stats were. So I guess coming back to my slide deck and thinking about that kind of being this, facing sexism at work, I kind of wanted to just bring a couple of examples to mind. So this is me and my colleague Laura here out in the field, and as you can see, we're in our PPE, we're getting stuck in, and we were sampling mine tailings there up at Horn Island, which is the furthest north I've ever been in Australia, up there in the Torres Strait. And as you can see, not scared of hard work, we're absolutely filthy and smiling because we were having an absolutely bloody great day. But, afterwards, a comment was made about me undertaking this field work. And I guess a site representative or colleague from the funder said she couldn't possibly be a geologist because she looks too pretty in a dress, which I thought was ridiculous. And to me, that's a real sign of toxicity. I remember the first time I ever did a keynote presentation, I was really nervous. It was probably 2017, and I was at the Sampling and Blending Conference, the World Sampling and Blending Conference, and it was as thrilling as it sounds, I may add. But I was asked to do a keynote, and for a young person at the time, it was thrilling to be offered an opportunity to do a keynote presentation. And so I was sitting there up on the front desk, everyone's sort of looking at you at the front of the stage back in those days, if we can remember those before COVID. And the other person on the keynote panel turned around to me and he said, it doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth, they'll only be looking at how attractive you are, which I have to say, I was shocked, I was appalled, and I found it just the most destabilizing comment that, somebody could say to you before you get up to actually talk about your science. And I know that I didn't do a very good job in that presentation because I was just so angry with this comment. How am I going to deal with this? And so for me, that was not the best talk I ever delivered. And it always just, I don't think sometimes people realize that a compliment like that, which isn't a compliment, is actually quite destroying. So for me, that was another example of toxicity. And this is one of my least favorite ones, but back in the days when we did used to be able to go to conferences, for some reason, the conference dinner seems to be a place where you get blokes in the room who've had a few, free wines or free beers or whatever, and they get very aggro, and they certainly seem to take, or in my experience, and I've experienced this, and unfortunately members of my team have as well, sort of female members, experience this kind of aggression about the fact that women shouldn't be at a conference. And it's like, this was said to me, to one of my students in 2017. It's been said to me most recently, probably just before COVID struck, in a conference in Cape Town. This guy was relentlessly just aggressive at me in terms of like, you shouldn't be here. Why are you even getting up and presenting in front of us? How dare you? And, interestingly, I was standing there surrounded by a bunch of men. I hadn't been shocked by this comment because unfortunately, I've had comments like that many, many times in my career. Even as a young person when I was growing up in the UK, obviously I'm Asian, I was growing up in the Thatcher era, so there was a lot of racism just in general. So I guess I'm kind of a bit hardy to comments like that. But the men around me certainly were so shocked. In fact, they froze. Nobody jumped to my defence, which in some ways I'm kind of glad at, because I guess I don't need a knight in shining armour. But they couldn't believe that somebody could speak to another human like that. So I guess to me, it's just another example of toxicity. And it's this kind of attitude that to me absolutely needs to go. And I guess I'll get to how we need to start making changes in terms of seeing comments like this that maybe men think are quite inert. They're really not inert. They're really quite powerfully damaging. Now, this is one of my favourite ones. Now, this is I guess a screenshot I took of a recent panel I'm on, or a conference committee. Now, who can see a lot of diversity in that panel? And this, let's not forget, it's 2020 to 2021. Is there a lot of diversity in what you can see here? Obviously, I've maintained anonymity by blanking out people's faces except my own. Well, there is some diversity. I mean, there's a guy here who's got hair, so not everyone's bald. There's even a guy here who's got coloured hair, and another one here too with a little bit of colour here. So we can say that we are making some leaps and bounds in terms of diversity, because not everyone's got no hair. But the point is this is not acceptable. And in fact, we are seeing some changes in terms of people taking like male pleasures and Athena Swan sort of certificates and so forth. But, we need to do more. And this is really just, I don't know, it's quite a tricky bunch of people to deal with in many ways. So much so that I was actually on a field trip with them, and we were doing a bit of a scoping to look at sites for a field trip associated with the conference that then obviously has had to transition online. So this was perhaps a little while ago. I remember being on the bus and I felt very brown, I felt very female, and I felt very young. We'd had a conference or a dinner the night before. Actually people wouldn't even pour me wine, they wouldn't talk to me, which I found a bit interesting, but never mind. But the question came up as we were driving around, and we were going through some old coal mines and some tin mines. And one of the guys, one of these older gentlemen, said to the bus, "Oh, what's the ore mineral for tin for this particular site?" So I said, "Oh, it's cassiterite." And then what happened? Can anyone guess what happened? That happened. Gender deafness. Now, I watched the misrepresented. I'm sure many of you online also watched that too. And I hadn't cottoned onto the term gender deafness until then. And I was so pleased to actually have something that I could identify with in terms of this type of behaviour. And I'm sure if I did one of those Mentipols right now, have you ever experienced gender deafness? I'd probably see a lot more of the yes category than the no category for the women online, certainly. So, yeah, I said cassiterite. There was radio silence. And I didn't say it quietly, I may add, because I actually finally felt like I had a valid contribution to make to the bus and the conversation. So I said it really loud. Nobody heard it. But then my male colleague, and this was actually the only decent guy on the trip, and then the person who would actually talk to me, he then sort of repeated what I said. He kind of looked at me and he said, cassiterite. And obviously, I think you can all guess where this is going in terms of the reaction of the guys on the bus. Well done. What a great guy you are. They were like, oh, you're such a smart guy. This is why you're on the field trip. You are just such an amazing geochemist. One even went so far as saying, because I guess they're representative of a society, they're like, you should be the next society leader. You're such a smart guy. And I remember this poor guy, who was actually sort of, a female advocate or a friend in that context. He just looked at me and he was just dumbfounded. And I was just like, this is what it is. I mean, unfortunately, we have to put up with gender deafness. I guess when it's me, myself, and I'm the one encountering it, I suppose there's a certain amount I can take. But my team are comprised of women, mostly women, I should say. Well, I do have men too on my team. And certainly a lot of the students I've supervised in the past have also been female. So when it's one of them who face it, I guess like the mothering instinct in me comes out, and I really just feel like this. Obviously, Mona had a lot to say in terms of, her opinions about the patriarchy. But as I get older, I find myself more and more identifying with kind of the things that Mona has said in certainly her book and her sort of other outlets of communication. But I don't necessarily know that that's the right way to go, because I know that sometimes my overpassion for some of the mistreatment that I have, it can have consequences. Like I have two sons, and I remember my older son saying to me, oh, I wish I was a girl, mummy, because then I wouldn't grow up to be like a man, because basically I'd been kind of just describing all of these experiences. And so, I don't know, I suppose there's got to be a happy medium in terms of balancing, I guess, or a sensible way to actually outlet those opinions. Anyway, here's something that's kind of interesting stroke depressing. I suppose there's probably a few of us on the line who are working in the university sector. I did borrow this from Caroline Tiddy and a talk that she gave earlier in the year. And I screenshot this slide because basically it represents it beautifully. I mean, I was trying to find some statistics regarding, females in senior academic kind of leadership positions. So as we can see, male to female, level A, level B, we see that leaky pipeline effect is very much coming in. And I think Caroline is one of your speakers in a later session, and perhaps it's something that she'll touch on more. But certainly she's written some very good bulletins about leaky pipeline. And it's certainly something that we see in our organisation. It's probably things that you see in your organisations too. But it's not just in the academic space, sort of looking at the Australian mining sector, male to female. I mean, this is no surprise. We know that mining is a male-dominated industry, that's for sure. But what are the things that we could change to make people feel, or women certainly feel more comfortable to actually undertake, mining as a longer-term career? I mean, FIFO working and balancing that against family is certainly one thing to think about in that context. And actually, if we look at industries with the most female managers, and I thought this was an interesting graph or bar graph from Statistica. Yes, it is a bit old, it's 2015, but it definitely shows that in terms of mining and quarrying, only 12% of the industry have female management compared to all these other sectors. I mean, I suppose maybe some are not a surprise, but that is quite, it's quite staggering to actually see it laying out like that. And I remember going to an AusIMM lunch, I think maybe it was a couple of years ago, or maybe it was a Y-Mark lunch, anyway, regardless, they put this statistic up. There was a keynote speaker and based on, I guess, some research that had been undertaken, they said that gender equity wouldn't be achieved until 2221. And I don't know about you on the line, I can't wait that long. I guess everyone in the room, we kind of sat there, we were a little bit shocked, maybe relieved almost to have a number. I mean, in some cases, you don't want it to be going on for more and more centuries or millennia. Kind of maybe sort of nice to have a number that almost seems like, you could envisage, right? So it's not me, it's not my grandkids, it's going to be my great-great-great-great-grandchildren who finally might have equity. But that's ridiculous. Why can't my grandchildren have equity? And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, I guess, is where I'm going. But certainly things like this are great. I mean, we're all sitting here together. We're having active conversations about how we can improve the mining industry and earth sciences for women. There are many organisations which celebrate the achievements, and there's also, new societies, so we can get together and sort of, I guess, form a collective of people in a safe space and have that opportunity to have opinions, but also talk about how we can, not just be the women in tennis, but we can actually integrate into the more general societies and actually have impact. Because even though we are obviously able to participate in all of the societies, do we have impact in the way that we want? I'm not sure yet. Certainly it felt like from that panel that I showed you where I was the only female, maybe not so much yet. So what do we need to do? What changes do we need to make? And certainly, as I said, societies like this are a great way in which, or meetings like this are a great way in which we can actually start to have those discussions to sort of formulate those pathways forward. And here's an example. This is the Mel Pledge. I don't know if you have something equivalent up at Monash, but certainly here at UQ, this is a pledge that people certainly across the university, but it's very great to see that the level CDs and these sort of commit to the pledge, where basically you will not be on a committee or a panel unless there's kind of appropriate diversity on that panel. So I think that's kind of a good way to go. And certainly this paper that Melanie was involved in writing is a very good thought-provoking piece, which I'm sure many of you have already read. So I'm not going to touch on that, but it's just to say that that's part of the solution. Now, I'm showing this photo, and I don't know if a lot of people have seen this photo, but I guess this was put out when My Watch, which is my group, was established. It was really weird, I must say. It was a weird time to have, or the commentary that followed this was quite strange. You can see that there's, 5 women standing there. There's another 2 members that are missing from this photo, which is another woman who's based in Chile, Olivia, and Enrique, who's a male who's based in Chile as well. So this isn't all of the team. But the comments that followed were kind of interesting. So a lot of people were very enthused to see so many women in geology, which is great. I'm always pleased to see that. But then there were kind of those patronising ones like girl power. I'm a woman, girl power, really. And then there were those ones that were slightly, aggressive. Why is this such a female team? Do you only hire women? And one of the guys who actually has sort of given me a bit of a grin about only hiring women, his team is all male. He's got 1 woman now who's in administration. So, he's a guy with an all-male team sort of giving me grief about having essentially what looks like an all-female team. So it's interesting that even when you do, comprise a team, that you can still have such aggression towards you. Like, how am I supposed to answer a question like that? Why is this such a female team? It's such a female team because I've employed this team for their skills. There is, some people said, what a diverse team, which also confused me a bit because in this particular photo, I can't see any men, and also we're all quite young. So in terms of thinking about diversity, just in some obvious manners, that's not a diverse team just to look at us. But if you look at our skill set, yes, we certainly are a diverse team. And so I guess that's kind of the thing. There is diversity, but it's not necessarily what you can see immediately in that picture. So I don't know, I guess even if you're faced with animosity because you've comprised a team, and if it is, just organically a particular demographic, don't be bullied by people is kind of my point there with bringing this up, because the guys who've sort of posed these sorts of questions, I'm not letting them change my sort of future hiring methodologies. I mean, the next person who presents me with an excellent CV might be a man, it might be a woman. I'm going to pick the person who has the right skills for the job, and that's how it always should be. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to touch on is being a person of colour. Sometimes I do feel a bit like it's tokenism, and I'm asked to do things because I am a person of colour, and that is not great to be marginalised in that way either. I have a lot to contribute from having lots of different perspectives, being, when people look at me, they expect an Asian voice to come out, and I can see that they're immediately confused when this British accent comes out. And I always sort of have this kind of 5 seconds where they look really quizzically at me, where they can't quite understand what's going on, because not only do I have quite a British accent, but it's also a bit of a coarse one. Like, I don't speak the Queen's English. I'm from just outside London, and it certainly is reflected in my accent. So yeah, I wanted to know now about your opinions in terms of facing racism or witnessing racism. So I want you to go back to your phone. This time the code is 21150195, and I'm going to try and find it here. I think it's here, yes. So hopefully that's working well. And so my question here was, have you ever encountered or witnessed racism at work? Because certainly you may not have, fortunately, I hope you haven't been a victim, but certainly sometimes you can be standing on the sideline and you can see behaviour or a colleague being treated in a certain way, and you can see that it's racist, and I guess it's hard to articulate what to do. I mean, certainly, what do you do if you see somebody being, victimised because of the colour of their skin? it's hard sometimes to step in and to know whether or not you should say something, if you should overstep that mark, or, you know, to talk to them in terms of how they want to handle it. And certainly I know people who are going through things like that right now, and it is a very difficult thing to navigate. So unfortunately, the statistics were, in my opinion, sad again. 23 yeses and 2 nos, which it's 2021. That's absolutely inappropriate. Now, I want to take you back to Christmas time last year. Certainly in Melbourne, I guess you guys were spending a lot of time at home, but I don't know if many people tapped into this thing that happened in the UK. So, being British, there's one thing that we always used to look forward to at Christmas time, and that was the Royal Society science lectures. So they would, the Royal Institution, they would put out a bunch of lectures. As a young girl, I used to love watching them. I didn't necessarily always understand them, but it was great kind of seeing a professor talking about something very important in terms of science or otherwise. And this year I was utterly thrilled that my old professor, Chris Jackson, so I knew him when he was a postdoc and we'd done some field work together in the Pyrenees. He was invited to be the first, it wasn't because he was the first black lecturer. In fact, they were doing an Earth Science series and they asked Chris to go along because Chris is a brilliant speaker. He is so engaging. He is just a fantastic speaker. You know, he was on the BBC. He did a couple of programs for the BBC. So in terms of like big ticket item, he was certainly the right person to ask to be in this Earth Science series. Now, as you can imagine, what happened to Chris, and if you have been on Twitter and you follow Chris Jackson, you'll know this story well. So he delivered his lecture, it was great, but actually what happened was, on announcing that he was giving his lecture, he got absolutely abused by the trolls and the racists on Twitter, which is just appalling. He actually had to report racial abuse to the police. And if you sort of go onto Twitter and you follow him, Size Matters, you can kind of read, I guess, some of the things that he had to go through, all because he wanted to go and give a presentation as part of the Royal Institution lecture series on his science, which is obviously based on analysis. Like, how utterly ridiculous is that? Well, at the time it's 2020, now it's 2021, and it was just utterly appalling, in my opinion. In the UK, and I guess it was Black in Geoscience Week, and Chris obviously was asked to contribute. He's since moved from the Imperial College to the University of Manchester, which is, I think, where he did his undergraduate degree. So for him, it's kind of coming full circle. He didn't leave because of racists. It just happened just at that time. But anyway, there's Q&A with him, and it just kind of said, he said, it doesn't matter how senior or powerful you may appear or how prestigious your institute is, racists and racist behaviour occur everywhere, such that even Black leaders are subject to discrimination, which can negatively impact their mental and physical well-being, as well as their professional development. And it's like, I don't know about you on the line, I find that so heartbreaking to read that. But unfortunately, I know that that's true, because I suppose in some regards, I can definitely identify with that. But it just, what's it going to take to change in 2021? And so Chris, with other scientists in the UK, they came together and they published this paper in Naturegeoscience. I'm sure many of you have seen this. It was published in May 2021. But it was a perspective in the UK on racial diversity in the global north. And I just wanted to pick out a couple of, paragraphs that kind of resonated. So there's this one here. Certainly there's this great piece. In fact, I could have picked out any paragraph, but certainly this one was about the stereotype of a geoscientist as a white man, compounded by the perception that geoscience is an outdoors-only activity, and perpetuated by marketing materials that features white students in rugged backgrounds. And that's true as well, actually. I had a former classmate of mine who now works at the Natural History Museum, and she was asked by, I guess, one of these outdoorsy companies to sort of be a model and sort of showing all these different environments, her wearing their gear, which I guess kind of speaks to that a little bit. And there was this other statement here too about retention into postgraduate research. Again, this is quite heartbreaking if you think this is a 2021 article. BAME students applying to high tariff research intensive institutes are less likely to be accepted than white students with comparable qualifications. Why? For example, BAME applicants to mathematical, physical and life science subjects at Oxford are 5.8% less likely to receive an offer than their white counterparts, even after accounting for prior attainment and course choice. Okay, well, maybe we expect, maybe we put up with the institutionalized kind of stuffiness of Oxbridge. I remember as a student doing my A-levels, one teacher said those dreaded words to me, which was like, you know what, you actually might be good enough to go to Oxbridge. And I went home and I told my parents, and they were thrilled. And so my dad did what every Asian father would do, and he rang up one of the deans in sort of the geography college, because it was geography that I was interested to go and read. And then we had to, you know, we went on a trip up there, and my dad sort of stuck me under this professor's nose and was like, oh, here's my daughter, you know, can she come to Cambridge? And it was all very nice, but like as a brown person, I just really felt like I didn't fit in. There was no way on earth. I knew just sort of walking around that town, and the professor was lovely. There was no disregard, nothing against him. He was very welcoming, but I just didn't feel like the sort of environment where someone like me would be, regardless of whether or not I could academically attain it. I just utterly discredited myself and discounted myself from going there. And I went to Imperial College instead, which I was much happier about because it was a great place in terms of diversity and vibrancy. But it's just bad that you actually would go into a situation like that where you have the academic ability to do it, but you just discount yourself because you just couldn't see yourself there because of the demographics. And so they did pull together some data, which was good. Obviously, a good scientific paper needs data from, I guess, from the UK HESA. And, you know, they looked at the statistics in terms of Black, Asian, mixed and other ethnic groups actually signing up to geology. And we can see that, you know, there was sort of a fundamental lack of well, not lack, but there is sort of a notable minority there in terms of people from those different wakes of life actually signing up to geology. Try me think a little bit about why is that the case? And certainly some of the things they picked out in terms of explaining the data that they collected or evaluated. Having role models to identify with is important to foster a sense of belonging in the scientific community. And it kind of made me wonder, like, why did I end up in earth sciences? Like, how did that happen? Because as a kid, you know, as an Asian kid particularly, this is what you're told. You'll be a doctor. You'll be a doctor. Okay, if you're not good enough to be a doctor, maybe you'll be a pharmacist. No. You should be a doctor. Oh, you're not doing too well at science. Or maybe you should be a lawyer. No. Pull your socks up. You should be a doctor. Oh, maybe your grades aren't so good. Well, maybe be a dentist then. And then if you're a bloke, maybe they'll finally land in engineering or whatever. But, you know, as an Asian kid growing up, that's basically the pathway of your parents' thought process. And I guess when you look at other Asian people and particularly Asian women in professional roles, at that time when I was obviously a really attractive 11-year-old, that's kind of the role models that you see in a professional capacity, apart from obviously your direct line of sight, which may be your mother or your grandmother, etc. I didn't really feel like any of that gelled for me. So maybe as a kid, I was really confused. I mean, I knew that I loved geography. I knew that I loved earth sciences. I really wanted to be a climate scientist. I wanted to be a meteorologist. I didn't take maths and physics further enough for that to sort of be an option for me at university. But I was always fascinated to do something in earth sciences. And, you know, as a kid, this is I guess a hot back to one of my field trips at the Lake District, which is what you can see in the background there. Obviously, this is one of those expectation versus reality moments. Thought it would look like that, actually looked like that, but that didn't put me off. I didn't seem to mind it. That's me there. But certainly, I was a bit of a weird kid in that sense, like breaking the Asian convention. I didn't want to be any of those things. I wanted to be a scientist. So finally, I think my parents realised that, you know, it's probably better for me to be professionally happy, and they did, you know, sort of let me go off to Imperial College, which was great. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I didn't have a role model, but I'm glad that I had the courage to sort of do something different, because I had so many fantastic experiences, as you can see, always with a hard hat, safety first. I don't know quite what good that hard hat is going to do with this coastal armour, but there we go. Got ticked off on a risk assessment. But, you know, there's so many exciting experiences to have. And I think it's so important that we go out and we actually tell the next generation about them. So I guess one thing that I've certainly been keen to do, and I've certainly tried to do as my career has developed, is to talk to young people in terms of just telling them what's out there in terms of career choices, and, you know, even just walking around in my PPE. So, I mean, I remember walking into my kids' daycare centre, and, you know, obviously most of the time I guess I'm dressed in my office clothes, but, you know, when we go to do our sort of test work in our labs, we have to be fully in our PPE. And so one day, or a few different days, just couldn't really be bothered to get changed at the end of the day. So I just went to go and pick my kids up in my PPE. And, you know, most times if I'd have gone in there in my blazer or my dress or whatever, kids don't bat an eyelid. But when I walked in my PPE, all the kids turn around and stare at you, but particularly the girls. And I'm really glad to see like all these kind of young kids sort of taking notice of the fact that you can be this very different looking woman in terms of being, you know, this Asian brown woman sort of coming to pick up her kids in PPE. So I think it's, you know, even small things like that can have a big impact. So I think, you know, if there's one thing to take away from this, like just as much as, and I'm sure everyone on the line does, but as much as you can get out and talk about what you do and be very visual in the society to the younger members, it's certainly important in terms of driving that change, because if we're not actually putting ourselves out there as the role models, we're not going to see any of those demographics change. So it's something that I enjoy doing. I'm not sure the students enjoy doing, because as we can see here, this girl's actually more interested in the book, but you know, I'm still going to give it a crack. Okay, so the next one that I wanted to touch on was being an early career researcher or a mid-career researcher. As I said before, I do look quite young. I should be grateful to my parents and my heritage for my young genes. Certainly, I love it when I go out to field sites with some of my students or my postdocs. And they know that someone's coming to site, or a pair of people are coming to site, and they know that one's sort of the senior research fellow, and they know that one's like the student or the postdoc, and they always assume that I'm the student, which I think is great, because I have a lot of fun with that, because then they say to my colleague, oh, your student's really smart. So I'm like, oh, I'll take the compliment. But anyway, that's a bit of a side point. But I wanted to ask you guys now, next Mentimeter poll, put in code 21150195, and it might even be the second slide after this. Let's see. Yes, it's this one. So I'm going to share that one, and I hope that one works. Have you experienced prejudice at work because of your age? So, I mean, that could be if you're an older person too, because let's not forget right now, it almost feels like for men of a certain age, you know, they get quite a lot of flack in terms of being from a particular demographic. I certainly feel sorry for my husband sometimes, because he's a white middle-aged man. And yeah, I mean, I will quite freely sort of say, oh, white middle-aged man. And it's kind of also not fair for me to prejudice him because of, well, his demographics too. So this is a tricky one in some ways. Not sure. Okay, there's a few unsures there, and that's okay, because it is a tricky one to really rationalise. But it's one that certainly I sometimes feel like I get a lot of tokenism for, and that's kind of where I'm going with this. I really hate that. I got asked to be on, well, I've been asked around a few ARC grants, and one person just blatantly said to my face, he didn't want to listen to my science. He didn't want to listen to what I could contribute to the grant. He was like, we need you on this because you're young and because you're a woman. And it just like, what do you do with that? Some people are like, you know, I spoke to some people about this, and I was like, look, that's not right. Some people gave me the advice, oh, but it's good for you to be on an ARC grant. So just suck it up and just be on it. And I'm like, but I'm not even going to do anything if we get the grant, because you know, even in what he perceives that I can do is actually not what I can do, because this is my science, but he hasn't taken the time to listen to what my science is. No, don't worry about that. It's just good for you to be on ARC grant. I don't agree with that at all. So I think tokenism is harmful. It's such a bad thing to do. Don't ever be a token is, I guess, the thing that I want to leave you with. I just want you to have the courage to say no. If you think it's happening to you, if you think you're being invited on something just for any of those tokenistic reasons that I've talked about, just say no. There's absolutely no way that you should put up with that. And if you say yes, it won't change. It will just give the signal that yes, it's fine. We'll just keep treating people like that. It's not fine. So I just want to say, have the courage to say no. Even if it's great for your career, it's not great, because it's not the right way to be. So that's it. That's the end of that one. Now the last one. This is a bit of a tricky one, because, you know, I think fathers as much as mothers right now in geoscience, maybe particularly, but also in other wakes of and other sort of walks of life, also sort of find this work-life balance really hard to maintain. But as a mother, I certainly do feel that. I feel judged for having an unbalanced work-life balance, if that's a proper sentence, which it probably isn't, but never mind, you know what I mean. I had my first child when I was doing my PhD. Not ideal, but not terrible. Certainly there were many benefits. Both my husband and I were undertaking our studies. So in many ways, that kind of flexibility you need to, you know, one of you minding the child whilst one of you is writing your thesis and vice versa, you know, there was a lot of agility that was afforded that helped us both actually get to the finish line. But I do remember saying to some people at the time when I was pregnant, finding it out that I was pregnant, being an international student away from my mother, my father, all my friends, family, it was just my husband and I. It was hard. It was really hard. No one asks the question to international students of, in that particular situation, or at least they didn't then. No one says, are you okay? How are you going to cope? What are you going to do? Can I do anything to help you? It was just, it was a little bit at the time, wow, you're never going to finish your PhD, are you? Well, you're just going to, yeah, you're not going to get, and it was just like an absence of a support network. So I guess when I look at sort of colleagues around me who face similar situations as their professional careers evolve, I always make sure that I do as much as I can to make their lives easier, because I don't want someone to go through something like that again. But the other sorts of judgment you get is from, not in a professional capacity, but it is certainly in that personal sort of space where people are like, oh, well, you're not here to pick up your child for this or that. And it's, you know, I guess it's just dealing with those sorts of comments. Back to Mentimeter, I've got another question that I want to ask you guys. Yes, this one. So if you can go to this code, 23789253, present that one. Have you experienced or witnessed difficulties in balancing childcare and career making at work? And, you know, if you don't have kids, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to answer that. That's, or maybe if you want to comment that you've witnessed somebody, which is good, then please do. See, it's a real juggling act. I don't know that I'm there yet in terms of balancing my life. I certainly definitely feel like I prioritize my work over my kids, which is not great for my kids, I must say, but I guess it is what it is. I haven't worked it out yet, I haven't cracked it. And so I guess, I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to wrap up soon, but, you know, how the world sees the role, how the world sees the role of women. You know, the role of a woman in society is to be good mothers and wives. And, you know, certainly it's interesting to see that 30% of Australians at the time of this poll agreed with it. And, you know, a lot of these statements are things that I'm sure everyone agrees with in terms of workplaces still male-oriented. You know, for those of us who do the school run, you know, an 8 a.m. meeting can be very tricky, but you never want to be the person who says it. You don't want to be like, oh, well, she can't do that, she's got kids, which is a really difficult one to negotiate. This one's really important. It's hard to get your career back on track if you take long career breaks, because the natural time for promotion can often coincide with childbearing years. There's a lot stacked against us, but perhaps one of the most distressing things I came across when I was sort of doing a bit of research was thinking about real difficult situations people are in. You know, if you don't have a tenured position and you become pregnant, you may be forced into like some really awful situations. Like, you know, this woman here is sort of describing that she had to make the decision to have an abortion because she knew that she wouldn't be able to get back into academia again if it coincided with a period of unemployment. And I think it's shocking that we've got people in that particular position. We need to sort of make sure there's better frameworks in place, and motherhood really just isn't a taboo. If you're lucky, maybe you'll traumatize your kids. And so I just want to finish on a happy snap. These are my poor kids who every time it's school holidays, I think that they dread the school holidays because I'm always taking them out somewhere different. So this was my youngest child, Archie. I was going to supervise my first honours student doing her field work, but I was probably about 2 months before going back to work on maternity leave. But I had to go out in the field. I wanted to go there. I wanted to be there for her. I wanted to try and make it all work. So I took my kids with me. Again, recently I had to take my kids up on a sampling campaign. They've been to every single slag dump and sort of tailing storage facility pretty much that I've ever been to, Queenstown. And, you know, we've got the school holidays coming up next week here in Queensland. And guess where we're going? That's right, we're going to have a look at some mine waste. So the poor kids, I think they must really dread the school holidays. But finally, the thing that I actually am is I'm actually an environmental geoscientist. That's what I am. I want people to see me like that, because that is what I've spent all of my blood, sweat and tears actually pouring my heart and soul into. So my last Mentimeter poll is shown there. And so if we can just go to that one, I think should be on this one. Yeah, I'm going to share that one. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go present. And I want to know which discipline you work in, or if you're a student, which discipline do you think you will work in? I guess when you start thinking about your geological career, where do you think you're going to go? So type in an answer if you can see that code 23789253. It's got deep time geology. Hopefully we'll see him pouring in a bit. Geophysicist leader. So at this point in time, it feels like we're all minorities here. Oh, actually, the environmental scientists, we're not the minority in this group. That's great to see. Excellent. I'm glad to see that there's a lot of diversity there in terms of disciplines, and that should be the diversity that we're focusing on, and that's the diversity that really gives us strength. Anyway, that's great. Just keep your answers coming in. I'm going to just wrap things up with this presentation. So, for somebody like me who works in environmental geology, environmental geoscience, and I'm not scared to say that. Sometimes I feel really embarrassed to say I'm an environmental geologist, but I don't know why, because it's not embarrassing. It's awesome because we get to work with so many different, aspects of the business, communities, geological service. We get to work everywhere, and I actually think that that's great. And we actually have to be fundamentally built on an understanding of mineralogy. And, maybe the word environment in there sort of feels like it's soft and touchy-feely. It's not. It means that we also have to deal with, the same things that you guys do in terms of mineralogy, geochemistry, surface processes, thinking about the origin of these materials. The thing that's always, been the center of my career has been thinking about acid and metalliferous drainage, and that's what motivates me. And when I think about acid and metalliferous drainage, there's a lot of reasons as to why the approach we take to mine waste rehabilitation doesn't work. Maybe it's because we haven't had diversity in those panels, like those guys I showed you with the greyed out faces. Those are the people who've been sort of running the show for decades now, and this is the best that they could do. But perhaps if they started to embrace some of that diversity, we might see some real change. And I just wanted to show that, for us here at UQ, this really is a growing area of research. So I guess since we started my group, we've had lots and lots of active interest in terms of environmental geology and geochemistry and mineralogy, and we've had lots of new projects coming along because as an industry, I think people are starting to recognise environmental geoscience in its own right. So our group, we sort of have a mission statement where we're applying geometallurgical tools to enable geo-environmental characterisation of mine waste across the life of mine. And, we're trying to develop things. So the environmental testing isn't a minority in the room. So here's an example of a new actual prospect that was drilled out, and there was all this drilling that was undertaken, and a lot of it was hyperspectrally scanned, which is great. I suppose they wanted to get an idea of the mineralogy when they were thinking about developing their alteration models. 35 was nominated for scanning, 10% of everything that was drilled was nominated for MET testing, but only less than 1% of it was nominated for environmental testing, which kind of shows a bit of a minority there. I guess some of the work that my team have been doing is looking at ways that we can actually challenge being that minority and actually make use of some of the data that's been collected in other facets. So we're actually using that hyperspectral scanning and developing environmental indices so we can do some of that acid rock drainage or acid and metalliferous drainage prediction more effectively. And there's lots of other places and ways in which we've been, I guess, getting out and about and trying to make a bit of a difference. So this is a map that, everyone down there in Tasmania will know very well. It's a map of ARD across the state, but certainly, our team, we've been challenging that convention. I guess for ages now, mine waste has just been thought of this problem, and even the way that we deal with waste is ridiculous. It's never been a priority. It's always been a minority in terms of thinking about it's just further down the list. I don't care about that. There's no value. But now that conversation is really changing with people recognizing that there is a value in that material. And so it's great to see members of my team out and about. And so I had one of my postdocs down at Savage River just this week undertaking sort of sonic drilling to characterize the mine tailings they're building on a few years worth of research where we're looking for cobalt extraction from the mine tailings. So we're turning this problem into something that's hopefully going to be a secondary resource of this critical metal that we need. And certainly that's the type of work we've been doing up in Queensland. So, I'm really pleased with my team in terms of getting out and about, characterising lots of sites across this state. And again, instead of being that minority in the room in terms of environmental geoscience, not sort of being seen as a priority for funding or, even just in that early life of mine stages when you're characterising your ore deposit or thinking about what you're going to do once the sites come to a closure. It's great to see that change is being put in place and people put more importance on it. And here's just another example of some recent work that the team have been doing. So we've been sort of undertaking some more deeper drilling to look at the potential for cobalt recovery. So I guess instead of being a bit of a pain in the room, the mine waste is actually becoming potentially an asset. So I've breezed through that kind of back end about what our group are doing quite quickly. So sorry about that, but I'm sure you'll probably hear some of my other talks where I'll talk a bit more about those in detail. So I guess just as a final kind of slide, I just wanted to pull together some of those thoughts. And I've shared a few anecdotes there. And I don't know if I'm quite there yet in terms of articulating what solutions are. And I don't think it's down to one person to find them, but certainly sharing our war stories, comparing our experiences and working together as, as a community of very different people on very different sort of diversity challenges. I think we've got an opportunity to make the future better. So I think socially change is slow. I mean, that statistic that came up about the year 2221 is ridiculous in my opinion. It is slow, but don't give up. So I think, this active conversation building is good. We have to do more outreach. I mean, talking to the kids and making sure it's embedded into their heads from day one that you can be anything and you should accept everyone is so important. It's going to take a long time to change perhaps the attitudes of the older people in their families, but certainly, that's where we need to make sure that we're being seen and we're having those conversations. We always have to fight for each other. Like, if you see that a colleague of yours has had a difficult morning because of a minority issue, step in and help them. Don't leave them to just sort of try and figure it out for themselves. I mean, I've got, many examples of just sort of stepping in appropriately, obviously, be respectful of their feelings, but help people because people need help. It's not a one person's going to solve this. It's got to be a community of people working together to sort of solve these different challenges. Be mindful of what it feels like to be a minority because we don't want to go the other way. I mean, I sort of reference the white middle-aged male phrase and we kind of use it in passing a bit, but we do have to be mindful of what it feels like to be a minority. And we don't want to do to them what's been done to us for many, many centuries and decades. Like that's not what we want to do. We want to find a way that we can all be together equally. And I guess just the final point about mind waste. I mean, I think previously I've always felt like, looking at the demographics of my university group, the environmental geologists, there was probably like 1 or 2 of us versus about 20 sort of geoscience graduates. We are sort of increasingly becoming less of a minority in sort of the geoscience community. And I see that as my group has grown, and I know that other groups around the world, their groups have also grown. And it has been because some of our views around things like mind waste are changing, and certainly just understanding that the ESGs and SDGs are actually really important to how we actually operate as a global community. But they are more than just buzzwords. I think that will always be a bugbear for me, that people just think, if I just shove the word sustainability or environment in there, it's fine, it will get a tick. No, that's not fine. You actually have to understand what that means and actually make a change because you want to make a change, not just because you want to get a funding application or a project over the line. I think we have to ensure knowledge transfer, and that's certainly taking the time to do outreach within your teams, to do talks, hopefully better talks than this, and just making sure that you get out and have those conversations because they're important to have. And I guess ultimately just build on it and ensure a lasting legacy and into the future. So, if we make these changes, like make frameworks, have sort of guidelines, make sure that there's a reference point that the people can build upon, because otherwise it just gets lost from one person to the next. So we need to make lasting pathways for these changes. So I think that's probably quite enough from me. I want to say thank you to my team. And I also want to say thank you to my husband, Nathan Fox, because he is wonderful. And I think certainly for a geoscientist, for me to be able to realise my dreams, I go out into the field a lot. I leave my kids routinely. And there has to be, I'd only be able to do that if I had equity in my marriage, which I do. And so I just want to say a big thanks to him. And I also want to leave you with the fact that waste is a design flaw, which is why if you ever see mind waste, don't think of it as waste, think of it as a potential opportunity. So that's enough for me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anita. That was an amazing talk that covered such a diverse range of really important issues. I'm just destroying my desk here, sorry. So we'll go to questions now, and people can put their cameras on or just unmute yourself and ask those questions. Alternatively, you can pop them into the chat and I will read them out. That's fine as well. And while people are thinking about that, I will have a question. I have a question about tokenism, because I reckon a lot of us are feeling this. And I know, Sandra, you posted something about this on Twitter not too long ago about being asked to participate in panels or be a speaker, a keynote speaker or something like that, been given these opportunities that sometimes they don't outright say, people don't outright say that it's because of your demographics, but you're like, oh gosh, I don't know if I feel it. I feel like it might be like, and I've not yet asked that question of like, are you asking me because I'm an awesome geologist, or are you asking me because I'm a woman and I'm an ECR? But do you reckon that we should be, but it also combats with my imposter syndrome, right? Like, am I feeling like I'm not the best person for that job just because I have that sort of issue? Do you think that we should be asking those questions about like, why are you asking me? Is that something you think we should be doing?
Yeah, I actually think it is, because sometimes I wonder that too. I do get asked a lot to give talks, which I don't mind. You'd think I'd be better at it by now, I may add, but
that was great.
No,
that was awesome.
I wasn't fishing. No, it's never polished. Sometimes I watch people's talks and they're like newsreaders, and I don't know that sort of gels well with me, but it's always a bit off the cuff. So thank you everyone for tuning in and bearing with me. But no, I think it is worth asking that question, because it will validate, you know, if they're asking you for the wrong reason, then it calls BS on that, and then you have the ability to say no. And I think we actually do need to sort of have the courage to say no. I think say no to some of those ARC grants. I possibly don't know that was popular with my management team, but I was like, no, I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm not doing this. I'm definitely not. I went to like one meeting where I thought, I've been asked to do this because they want me to contribute, and I think there was one other woman and the rest, maybe there was like 8 men, and I was the only person in mining in the room, and they wanted me in there because I was in mining. And so I'm contributing my experiences and sort of saying, all right, this is what happens here, stuff. And I'm massively getting talked down to by guys who are not in mining at all. Like, they're in very different disciplines of science. So it's like, wow, you know more than me about my topic, even though you're not a geoscientist. This is amazing. That Y chromosome is just fantastic. But yeah, I think actually calling out, if someone then can articulate why they've asked you, and it sort of calms the imposter syndrome because they've asked you for the right reasons, and that's good. That gives you the confidence to know, yeah, I should be here. But if it is blatantly because they're like, right, you're this age, you're this demographic, you'll look great, and you will know because they'll not be able to answer you properly. And I guess you can always tell when someone's lying a bit. And then it gives you the right to say no. And if they ask why you said no, to tell them why they said no. I guess if we don't call it out, it won't change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Emily, you have a question?
Hi, Anita. Great talk. Thank you so much. Just on that, do you think it matters though? Like, if you are getting asked to do these things, you know you're going to do an awesome job. We've just seen you've done an awesome job, for example. And a man in the same situation wouldn't ask that question. Like, even if they're asking you for the wrong reasons, having that exposure, showing people that you're an amazing role model and doing an awesome job, like, I think we probably all would, because this is a massive generalization, but typically women feel the need to prove themselves in a male-dominated field, and so they put more effort into it. So even if they're asking you for the wrong reasons, when you go in and show them that you're crushing it, isn't that enough, do you think?
That's a fair comment. I don't have all the answers, so
No,
if it's blatant, like, I don't know, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, if you were to say yes and you knew it was just such awful tokenism, then yeah, perhaps consider not doing it. But then yeah, perhaps if there is that opportunity that you are going to have this big reach and there's going to be like, you know, loads of like students in the room, you know, I guess there are pros and cons that you would have to weigh up. It's such a tough one. I think there's one society that I definitely won't talk for. If they were to ask me, I just wouldn't do it, because I've seen bad stuff from sort of senior people in terms of their approach to women. And so just the blanket, I just wouldn't do that for them. But yeah, I guess it's case for case. Yeah, talk it through. I mean, maybe if you do call them out on it and just ask the question, and then get them to understand that you know what they're doing. So then I guess there is also that thing, isn't there, where people think they're being really clever and they're sort of pulling one over you. And I don't know, if you call them out and be like, I know what you're doing, I don't know, maybe that's still a conversation that's worth having, but sort of making sure that you know the terms that it's on. I don't have the answers yet. I wish I did.
Yeah, sure. It's a really multifaceted sort of problem. Marina, do you have a question?
It's kind of just an addition to what we've just been talking in that I think the advice is really sound question and feel comfortable about it. I mean, I think you should feel comfortable if you've been chosen, even if you're, you know, the polka dot coloured unicorn from Mars. That's fine as long as they're honest with you. But my but is what's in it for you? What do you get out of it? Ask them to sign up to a MESA, check if they've got a code of conduct. Ask them if they've got something on their website about diversity and inclusion. Make a change.
Yeah.
Advocate for what we want. Yeah, I'll give you 25 minutes of my time and an hour of a presentation, but I want something out of this, either for me, and that could be asking for money to travel or money to do the talk and prepare for the talk, or free trip on the field trip, or something bigger than that. And if they don't have some of those things, send them stuff that they can easily pop on the website. So that was just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. We should do that. Yeah. And I guess we don't ask, do we? We don't ask. We just say yes or no. But yeah, we should be asking. Yeah.
Awesome. Indrani, do you have a question?
Well, I didn't have a question per se, but I wanted to comment on Emily's question and what Anita answered, is that sometimes, yeah, you're right, it's better to get say yes, and even though the intention was not right, you still get an opportunity to share your story, etc., etc. But we have to make sure that there's a follow-up, because quite often there's this, oh, you're a person of color, why don't you represent us, the diversity, etc., etc. But when it actually comes to supporting women of color or anybody of color, diverse backgrounds, say, that doesn't happen. So I think that's when we have to say no. So no, you can't just use me for talks to look good, tick the boxes on paper, but when it actually comes to furthering my career or doing something, there's not much help there. So I think there is a fine line, and like Anita said, at the time you just have to say yes or no, because like, do I use this opportunity regardless of the intent so I can just share my story because it'll help someone? But then can I also make sure that something, because I think it was said in the women's summit in Australia recently, we've had enough of talking. Something's got to be done. So it's great to be able to talk about it, but how about we actually do something as well? So yeah. Sometimes I agree with Anita and Emily. I'm just torn between the two as to when to say yes and when to say no. But I guess you can't do that when you're a young early career researcher. You just have to say yes and get it on your CV and get tenure, and then, you know, can of worms just flowing out, can or whatever, bigger than a can, whatever bigger than a can. Sorry, I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely, Indrani. I think those are some really great points. It's great to hear that, everyone having this conversation. Does anyone have any other questions that they would like to ask Anita? We have gone a bit over time, so a few people have had to leave as well.
That's okay. We're good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sorry, Heather, did you?
Yeah, it was just a really, really super quick one. Thanks so much, Anita, for a great talk. And it was just a comment again, really, that if you have to turn down an opportunity or you think you can't take one on, then don't forget that WOMESA have a database of women, and it highlights those looking for all different types of opportunities. So just keep that database. It's on a spreadsheet at the moment. Melanie and I are hoping to get it a bit more easy to access and search for people. But just remember, there's a spreadsheet. I think it's got about 260, 70 women in there, all looking for different types of opportunities. So just remember that you can have a look at that sheet and, you know, say, no, sorry, I can't do it this time. But, you know, here's like 3 or 4 women looking for those opportunities. And it does it by like discipline as well. So you can search for particular people.
That's cool.
Yes, good thinking, Heather. Good to get a plug in for that one. Great. Okay, if there are no further questions, then we might bring our seminar to a close. Anita, thank you so much. That was such an excellent talk and a great demonstration as well of Menti. That's an amazing tool to use in talks as well. Yes, thank you for such a thought-provoking and wide-ranging talk. It was awesome.
I'll share that data with you, Melanie. So yeah,
Thank
you can
you.
do what you can with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks everyone.